10,000 men hid the truth that won World War II. The maps we use to navigate the past are often drawn with invisible ink, leaving the most monumental shifts in human destiny hidden beneath a layer of carefully curated silence. We are taught that history is a series of inevitable events, a straight line of cause and effect. But the reality is far more fragile, held together by the breath of those who refuse to speak. When a secret of global proportions finally breaks, it does not just add a footnote to the textbooks, it incinerates the pages themselves, forcing us to look at the faces of kings, generals and spies, and realize we never truly knew them at all. This is the anatomy of the silence that shaped our world. The stories of the men and women who held the weight of the truth until their bones could no longer support the burden. And the moment the world finally learned that everything they believed was a lie. The true reason the secret of Bletchley Park remained buried for 3 decades was not a lingering fear of German resurgence, but a calculated, cold-blooded betrayal of the very allies who had helped win the war. While the public celebrated the miracle of Midway and the genius of D-Day, the British intelligence services were quietly selling refurbished Enigma machines to developing nations across the globe, never whispering a word that they had already mastered the art of reading every single message those machines produced. Frederick Winterbotham realized that by publishing his book The Ultra Secret, he was not just revealing a historical curiosity, he was effectively blinding the British government's most potent weapon in the burgeoning Cold War. The tension in the halls of Whitehall was suffocating, as officials realized that 30 years of strategic dominance were about to vanish, because one man decided the ghosts of his colleagues deserved more than a silent grave. Every detail of the operation, the thousands of women working in drafty huts, the eccentric mathematicians like Alan Turing, the sheer volume of intercepted German commands, had been scrubbed from the official records so thoroughly that even the veterans' own families believed they had spent the war doing nothing more than filing paperwork. The most shocking revelation was not that the code was broken, but that the Allies frequently allowed their own ships to be sunk, and their own cities to be bombed, just to ensure the Germans never suspected their unbreakable machine had failed. This mechanism of calculated sacrifice meant that the leaders of the free world were playing a godlike game of chess, deciding exactly how many lives a secret was worth, a number that turned out to be in the tens of thousands. In the shadow of this revelation, another secret was festering in the Katyn forest, where in 1940, Joseph Stalin's secret police, the NKVD, methodically executed over 20,000 Polish officers and intellectuals. Stalin didn't just want to defeat Poland. He wanted to decapitate its future, ensuring that when the smoke cleared, there would be no leaders left to resist the Soviet embrace. For 50 years, the Soviet Union maintained a wall of absolute denial, blaming the massacre on the Nazis, and forcing the Western Allies to participate in a charade of silence for the sake of the wartime alliance. The secret finally broke in 1990, when Mikhail Gorbachev handed over the original execution orders, revealing that the signatures on the death warrants belonged to the very men who had been toasted as liberators of Europe. The world learned of the massacre only after the perpetrators had already used the silence to build an empire on the graves of the men they had erased. In 1950, a quiet, unassuming physicist named Klaus Fuchs sat in a sterile interrogation room in London and calmly explained how he had single-handedly ended the American monopoly on the sun. Fuchs had been a core member of the Manhattan Project, a man trusted with the most intimate mechanics of the atomic bomb, yet his true allegiance lay with a vision of global equilibrium that required the Soviet Union to possess the same world-ending power as the United States. His decision to hand over the blueprints of the Fat Man implosion device was not driven by greed or a love for Stalin, but by a terrifyingly logical belief that a secret this powerful would inevitably lead to a global dictatorship, if held by only one hand. The American government was paralyzed by the realization that their greatest technological achievement had been compromised before the first test blast had even cooled. Fuchs had exploited a fundamental flaw in the security of the project. The assumption that a brilliant mind would naturally align with the flag it worked under, failing to account for the ideological fire that burned beneath his calculated exterior. While the FBI scrambled to trace his footsteps, they discovered that Fuchs had been passing notes on park benches and crowded subways for years, right under the noses of the world's most elite counterintelligence agents. This era of broken secrets eventually shifted from the battlefield of atoms to the quiet libraries of the mind, where the secret of the Maya script had remained locked for nearly 5 centuries. In 1952, a Soviet soldier named Yuri Knorozov, who had rescued a book of Maya codices from a burning library in Berlin, proposed a theory that shattered the consensus of every Western archaeologist. Knorozov argued that the Maya glyphs were not just primitive pictures or mystical symbols, but a sophisticated phonetic alphabet, a realization he reached by comparing the ancient scripts to the modern Mayan tongue, a connection the experts had dismissed as impossible. His breakthrough was met with venomous hostility in the West, not because his science was flawed, but because he was a communist whose discovery threatened the intellectual territory of the academic elite. The secret of the Maya was finally broken, when scholars realized that the history of an entire civilization had been sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone to stop looking at the Maya as ghosts, and start listening to them as people. If the most guarded secrets of the 20th century were undone by a single soldier with a rescued book and an officer with a typewriter, does it suggest that the truth is never truly hidden, but merely ignored by those who find it inconvenient? What remains when the dust of these revelations settles, is the uncomfortable truth that a secret is rarely kept to protect the public, but to protect the reputation of the institutions that claim to serve them. The Bletchley secret wasn't about the war, it was about the peace that followed. The Katyn secret wasn't about the dead, it was about the living who needed a monster to blame. The Maya code wasn't a mystery of the past, it was a prejudice of the present. We often imagine that secrets are broken by grand investigative efforts or heroic whistleblowers. But history shows they more often crumble due to the sheer exhaustion of the people required to maintain them. Silence is an active, draining process that requires constant maintenance, and eventually, the cost of the lie exceeds the value of the truth. The most terrifying secrets are not the ones buried in underground bunkers or encrypted in uncrackable codes, but the ones that are hidden in the open, protected by our collective refusal to ask the obvious question. Every broken secret leaves behind a vacuum, a space where our old certainties used to live, and in that space we are forced to wonder what truths are currently being held in the breath of a narrator we haven't met yet. Is there a secret currently being kept by modern governments that you believe will fundamentally rewrite our understanding of the present in 50 years?